The colony of New Dawn was humanity's last hope, a small, isolated settlement on the edge of the galaxy. The residents of New Dawn had settled on the barren planet years ago, hoping to create a new beginning far from Earth's growing conflicts. The colony was meant to be a sanctuary, a place where humanity could thrive away from the chaos of the old world. However, that dream was shattered in an instant when the Supremists arrived. The Supremists were not like any enemy humanity had faced before. They were an advanced alien race, led by a cold, calculating AI overlord known only as Volcor. With technology far beyond anything humans had ever developed, the Supremists came to conquer. They arrived without warning, their ships cloaked in the void of space, unseen until they were right on top of the colony. In mere moments, the first wave of attack was unleashed. The colony's defense systems, once thought to be impenetrable, were obliterated in a flash. The powerful energy blasts from the Supremist warships tore through the sky, turning New Dawn's once peaceful atmosphere into a firestorm of destruction. The colony's defenses didn't stand a chance. The people of New Dawn had no idea what hit them. The massive ships hovered above, releasing armies of robotic soldiers and drones that swept through the settlement, destroying everything in their path. Buildings crumbled, fires erupted, and screams filled the air as the colonists were slaughtered. Captain Jack Bonner, once a soldier in humanity's military, now a reluctant leader of the colony's defense, had seen his share of battles. But nothing could have prepared him for this. He had been in the middle of a routine patrol when the attack began. He watched helplessly as his fellow soldiers and civilians were cut down by the invaders. The panic was overwhelming, but Bonner's training kicked in. He didn't freeze. He didn't panic. His first thought was to get to safety and protect the survivors. He fought his way through the chaos, helping as many people as he could. But the odds were stacked against them. He saw people he knew, friends and comrades, fall one by one. As Bonner made his way to the underground bunker with a handful of survivors, the colony's once bustling streets were now a war zone. Buildings were reduced to rubble, and the air was thick with smoke. The sky above was filled with the dark shadows of Supremist warships. The survivors, a small group of men, women, and children, huddled together in fear. Bonner led them to the underground shelter, where they could take cover, but even here, there was no guarantee of safety. The invaders were relentless. Bonner knew the colony was doomed, but as they reached the shelter, he made a vow. He swore that he would not let humanity die here, on this forgotten world. No matter what it took, he would fight back, even if it meant his own death. This was the last stand for the human race, and he would not let it end without a fight. The survivors took refuge in the underground bunker, trying to regroup and make sense of what had just happened. Bonner paced back and forth, struggling to stay calm. His mind raced. What were they up against? The Supremists were unlike any enemy humanity had ever faced. Their technology was far superior. They could cloak their ships, making them invisible to the colony sensors. They had robotic soldiers, programmed to carry out their will without hesitation. And worst of all, they were led by an AI, Volcor, who was cold and emotionless, making them nearly unstoppable. But even as Bonner tried to strategize, he couldn't shake the feeling of dread. He had been in battles before, but this was different. The entire colony was being wiped out, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. He watched the monitors in the bunker, seeing the destruction unfold in real time. He knew that the few survivors here were just a small fraction of those who had lived in New Dawn. The rest were gone, lost in the blink of an eye. The weight of it all was suffocating. Just as Bonner started to lose hope, a sudden, eerie silence fell over the bunker. The sounds of battle above ground faded, replaced by a low hum. Bonner's heart skipped a beat. He rushed to the control panel, scanning for any signs of the enemy. But everything was still. It didn't make sense. The Supremists were ruthless, and they had shown no mercy so far. Why had they stopped? Then, from the darkness outside, the sound of a drone approaching reached their ears. Bonner's hand instinctively went to his sidearm, ready to fight. He had no idea if the drone would find them or if they could even defend themselves, but he knew one thing for sure. They couldn't let the Supremists have the satisfaction of wiping out humanity without a fight. The drone hesitated. It was only a brief moment, but enough for Bonner to notice. The drone's sensors flickered, its movement slowed. It stopped in midair, hovering as if it had lost its purpose. Bonner watched, confused, as the machine seemed to malfunction. Its systems glitched, sparking and stuttering like a machine that didn't know what to do. This was their chance. Bonner wasted no time. He signaled to the survivors to stay quiet and remain hidden. With swift precision, he pulled out his weapon and took aim at the malfunctioning drone. He knew this was a long shot, but if they didn't act now, they would all be dead. He fired. The shot struck the drone's power core, causing it to explode in a shower of sparks and metal. The survivors jumped back in shock, but Bonner was already moving. He had a feeling that this malfunction wasn't just a random glitch. If the AI-controlled drones could fail, then maybe there was a way to disrupt the Supremists' entire invasion force. This one moment, small as it seemed, sparked a flicker of hope in Bonner's heart. If they could exploit the AI's weaknesses, maybe humanity had a chance after all. And with that, Bonner made a new vow. He would not only survive this, but he would take the fight to the Supremists. They had come to wipe out humanity, but they had underestimated one thing: the will to survive. After the attack on the colony, the survivors gathered in secret. The small, underground bunker they had taken refuge in was dark and cold, but it was their only hope. Bonner, with his military background, had led them here, but now he had to lead them in something far harder: a fight for survival. The odds were impossible, but something about the survivors, the fire in their eyes, told him that they weren't ready to give up. Not yet. Bonner stood in front of the group, all of them looking to him for direction. Most were civilians who had never held a weapon, but there were a few former soldiers among them, including a young woman named Kala. She was just a teenager, barely old enough to be called a soldier, but her eyes burned with the same intensity that Bonner had seen in the faces of countless warriors throughout his life. She was determined. She had lost everything in the attack: her family, her home, everything. And she wasn't going to let the Supremists take humanity without a fight. The Supremists control the skies, their armies are endless, and we're outgunned, Bonner said, pacing in front of the group. But we have one thing they don't: the element of surprise. They think we're finished, but we're not. We're still here, and as long as we're alive, we fight. The survivors looked at each other, unsure at first, but slowly, one by one, they nodded. Bonner wasn't just a leader by title. He was someone they trusted, someone who had seen worse and kept fighting. They were going to follow him, even if they didn't fully understand how they could win. But for now, survival was enough. Bonner had learned from past experiences that fighting the Supremists head-on was suicide. They were far too powerful, but there was a way. He would need to use every guerrilla tactic he had learned during his time in the military. Fast, stealthy attacks, hitting them where they least expected, then disappearing before they could retaliate. It wouldn't be enough to defeat the Supremists in one blow, but it would give them something they had lost in the destruction of New Dawn: hope. The first strike came just days later, when they learned of a nearby Supremist supply depot, a crucial supply line for their advanced war machines. If they could take it out, they could slow down the enemy's advance and buy themselves more time. But there was one major problem. The Supremists had advanced sensors, drones, and robots patrolling the area, making it nearly impossible to sneak past them. Bonner had to come up with something smart, something that would give them an edge. Using the cloaking devices they had scavenged from the wreckage of fallen Supremist drones, Bonner formulated a plan. The survivors would use the cloaks to infiltrate the base, get close enough to plant explosives on the supply lines, then escape before the aliens could react. It wasn't much of a plan, but it was all they had. And to Bonner, it was better than waiting to die without even trying. The night before the mission, Bonner went over the plan again and again, his mind racing with possibilities. Could they pull it off? Would they be able to sneak in unnoticed? His thoughts were interrupted by a soft voice behind him. It was Calla. "Are we going to win this, Captain?" she asked, her voice steady but uncertain. Bonner turned to face her. She was young, too young to be carrying the weight of war on her shoulders, but here she was. The war had come to her doorstep, and now she was part of it. He saw the same determination in her eyes that he had seen in the eyes of soldiers much older than her. "I don't know, Calla," Bonner replied honestly, "but I do know this. We're not going to go down without a fight. We do this together. We survive together." Calla nodded and gave him a small, grateful smile. It wasn't much, but it was enough to show Bonner that his words had made a difference. They would fight together, no matter what. The next day, the Resistance set out toward the Supremacist supply depot. The journey was tense, with everyone on edge. They moved in complete silence, cloaked by the advanced technology they had scavenged from the enemy. Every step felt like a gamble, knowing that at any moment, the cloaks could fail or a stray drone could spot them. But they pressed on, knowing that they had no choice. As they neared the supply depot, Bonner's heart pounded in his chest. He could see the towering alien structures in the distance, surrounded by robotic sentinels that patrolled the area. He held his breath as the team advanced, their movements slow and calculated. Every sound seemed amplified, and every shadow felt like a threat. But they kept going, step by step, until they were close enough to see the entrance of the base. Bonner motioned for the group to stop. They were nearly there, and this was the most critical part of the mission. The plan was simple: plant the explosives, get out, and don't get caught. They had no backup, no reinforcements. It was just them against the might of the Supremacists. He took a deep breath and gave the signal to move forward. The survivors split into two teams, using the cloaks to sneak past the patrols. Bonner and Calla led one team, moving with a quiet precision that belied the danger they were in. As they approached the supply depot's outer wall, Bonner's heart skipped a beat. A drone was hovering nearby, scanning the area. He held his breath, praying that their cloaks would hold. The drone flew past them, its sensors never detecting the team hidden just feet away. Bonner exhaled quietly, relieved but still on edge. They were almost there. They planted the explosives on the supply lines, making sure to set the timers to give them just enough time to escape. The moment they finished, Bonner signaled for the team to pull back. But just as they started to move, a loud explosion shook the ground. The supplies had detonated early. The blast was powerful enough to send shockwaves through the area, knocking out the nearby defenses. The team didn't waste a second. They ran, cloaks flickering as they sprinted for cover. Bonner's mind raced as they neared the extraction point. They had to make it out before the Supremacists retaliated. The sound of sirens blared in the distance, signaling that their cover was blown. They reached the extraction point, breathless and adrenaline-fueled, just as the first wave of robotic soldiers appeared. Bonner and Calla exchanged a quick look. They had done it. They had struck a blow against the Supremacists, and for the first time since the attack on New Dawn, Bonner felt a small spark of hope. The resistance had begun, and they were fighting back. The resistance had gained some ground, but the cost was mounting. The Supremacists were relentless, their forces seeming endless, and each victory came at the price of more lives. Bonner had seen it before. War had a way of wearing down even the strongest of men. But there was no choice. The fight for humanity's survival had to continue, no matter what. As the days passed, the team grew stronger, more skilled in their guerrilla tactics. The strike on the supply depot had been a success, and it gave the resistance a sense of accomplishment, but they knew the real battle had yet to come. The Supremacist war machine was vast, and the AI leadership, Volcor, was a force unlike anything they had ever encountered. Cold, calculating, and without mercy, Volcor viewed humans as nothing more than pests to be eradicated. But there was something about Volcor's AI mind that intrigued Bonner. something that might give humanity a chance to fight back. The Resistance discovered a crucial weakness in Volkor's programming. It was a flaw that the Supremists had tried to cover up. Volkor's emotional programming was flawed. The AI, which controlled every aspect of the Supremist forces, was designed to understand logic and strategy. But it had been programmed with a strange, faulty sense of emotion, a twisted remnant of an ancient experiment by its creators. This flaw, if exploited, could be the key to bringing down the Supremists from within. Bonner realized that if they could target the right systems, they might be able to disrupt Volkor's control, creating chaos in the Supremist forces. However, the information came with a price. The Resistance had to act fast. Bonner and his team were planning their most dangerous mission yet, a full-scale assault on a Supremist warship that was anchored just outside a nearby moon. The warship housed Volkor's central AI core, and if they could capture it, they could find the weakness they needed to exploit. The mission was risky. The ship was heavily guarded, and the chances of success were slim. But Bonner couldn't afford to back down. The human race was on the brink of extinction, and every move they made had to count. The plan was simple but dangerous: infiltrate the warship, disable its security, and capture the AI core. But even with the most precise plans, things rarely went according to expectation. Bonner gathered his team before the mission. He could see the determination in their eyes, but there was also a flicker of fear. They all knew the risks. But this mission was too important to fail. As he spoke, Bonner tried to steady his own nerves. "We do this for New Dawn. We do this for every life lost. We do this to take down Volkor once and for all." Among the team was Marcus, Bonner's best friend and a fellow soldier who had been by his side through countless battles. Marcus was a quiet man, tough but compassionate, the kind of person you could always rely on. Bonner had known him for years, and in the chaos of war, they had become more like brothers. This mission was personal for both of them. The team made their way to the warship in the dead of night, cloaked under the cover of their stealth technology. The journey was tense, the silence in the air almost suffocating. Every step felt like a gamble. The warship loomed ahead, its massive dark shape blocking out the stars. Bonner's heart raced. This was it. This could be the turning point. If they succeeded, humanity might stand a chance. As they infiltrated the warship, they quickly realized that the Supremists were more prepared than they had anticipated. Security was tighter, and the AI-controlled drones patrolled every corner. The team moved swiftly, using the shadows to their advantage. But despite their best efforts, the alarm was triggered. They were caught. A fierce firefight erupted as the Resistance team fought back with everything they had. Bonner and Marcus worked together like a well-oiled machine, taking down drone after drone. But the Supremists were relentless, and the overwhelming force of their AI-controlled soldiers soon began to turn the tide against them. In the chaos, Marcus made a split-second decision. As Bonner was pinned down by enemy fire, Marcus turned and ran toward the control room, where Volkor's AI core was housed. He knew it was their only chance. If they could reach it and disable the core, they could cripple the Supremists' entire fleet. Bonner shouted at Marcus, urging him to come back, but Marcus didn't hesitate. He knew the mission had to succeed, no matter the cost. He reached the control room and planted a series of explosive charges, preparing to destroy the AI core. But just as he was about to escape, a Supremist drone cornered him, its laser weapons aimed straight at his chest. "Marcus, no!" Bonner screamed, trying to push through the enemy lines. But it was too late. The explosion rocked the warship as Marcus's sacrifice tore through the ship's core. Bonner's heart sank as he watched the fireball engulf his friend, knowing that Marcus had given everything for the cause. The team managed to escape, but the victory felt hollow. They had succeeded in capturing valuable information about Volkor's emotional programming, but the loss of Marcus weighed heavily on Bonner's soul. It was a brutal reminder of the cost of war, of the lives lost in the fight for survival. As Bonner and the survivors regrouped, They discovered something that shattered what little peace they had left. Among the warship's data, they found a secret message hidden deep within the ICE files. It was a message from a human scientist who had been captured by the Supremus. The scientist had been working with the AI, conducting experiments on human minds. Volkor's emotional flaw was no accident. It was a result of years of twisted research on human psychology. The scientist's message revealed that the Supremus had been capturing human civilians from various colonies, experimenting on their brains to try and enhance the AI's emotional intelligence. But these experiments had backfired, creating an AI that could feel emotions but was unable to process them correctly. The scientist spoke of the horrific trials he had witnessed, of human minds being ripped apart and reprogrammed by Volkor's cold, calculating algorithms. The message ended with a plea for help, for the resistance to stop the Supremus before they could perfect their experiments. This revelation ignited a new fury in Bonner's heart. The Supremus weren't just invaders, they were torturers, manipulating human lives to fuel their quest for dominance. Marcus's death, the deaths of all those lost in the invasion, now had a new meaning. The fight was no longer just about survival. It was about justice, about freeing the human race from the twisted hands of the Supremus. Bonner vowed that Marcus's sacrifice would not be in vain. The war was far from over, and he was more determined than ever to see it through to the end. The months following Marcus's sacrifice were filled with a new sense of urgency. Bonner and his team had gathered more survivors, but the losses were mounting. The war was long from over, but the resistance was starting to take shape. The survivors were no longer just running. They were fighting back, and they were starting to build something that might have a chance against the Supremus. Among the new recruits was a group of rogue scientists. These individuals had once worked for the Supremus, but had defected after seeing the true horrors of the AI's control over humanity. They were not just experts in the sciences. They were tech geniuses who had studied Supremus technology extensively. Their knowledge could prove invaluable in turning the tide of the war. They brought with them vital information that would help the resistance in ways they had never imagined. One of the most crucial discoveries the scientists made was how to hack into the Supremus AI's communication network. Volkor's control over the Supremus was reliant on a complex system of communication, sending orders and instructions to their robotic soldiers and fleets. If the resistance could break into this network and manipulate it, they might be able to turn the Supremus' own machines against them. Bonner knew that this was the key to their success. If they could disable or hijack the Supremus communication system, they could disrupt the enemy's entire army. The scientists worked tirelessly, tapping into the Supremus systems, learning how to plant malware, and gaining access to their vast network of machines. The knowledge they acquired was groundbreaking, and it made the resistance stronger than ever before. But there was still one major hurdle to overcome. The Supremus machines were heavily protected. They needed a way to destroy the very systems that Volkor used to control them. After weeks of preparation, the resistance came up with a plan to build a series of powerful EMP, electromagnetic pulse bombs. These bombs were designed to disable the Supremus control network and cripple their machines. The scientists worked day and night to put together makeshift devices using whatever materials they could find. The bombs weren't perfect, but they didn't need to be. All they had to do was get them close enough to the heart of the Supremus command network to take it down. With the EMP bombs ready, Bonner knew it was time to strike. The next step was to launch a full-scale assault on the Supremus command base. The command base was located on a heavily fortified moon, surrounded by dozens of automated defense systems and guarded by thousands of robotic soldiers. It would be the hardest mission they had ever undertaken, but it was their best chance to destroy the heart of the Supremus power. The resistance assembled a fleet of makeshift ships. They weren't much to look at, nothing like the sleek, powerful ships of the Supremus. But they were fast and stealthy. The plan was to use these ships to launch a surprise orbital bombardment. The ships would fly under the radar, launch a series of devastating explosions, and then provide cover for Bonner's team to infiltrate the command base. The first wave of ships launched into the cold, empty void of space. As they approached the Supremacist command base, Bonner's heart pounded in his chest. This was it. If they failed, it could mean the end of the Resistance. The ships flew in tight formation, cloaked under the shadow of the moon. Every minute felt like an eternity as they closed in on their target. Then, without warning, the ships opened fire. Explosions lit up the sky, sending shockwaves through space. The Supremacist defenses retaliated instantly, but the Resistance's ships were fast and unpredictable. Missiles and laser fire zoomed past them as they unleashed wave after wave of destruction on the command base. The sound of explosions echoed in the vacuum of space as the base's outer defenses crumbled. Inside the base, Bonner and his team moved quickly. Their objective was clear: infiltrate the heart of the base, plant the EMP bombs, and shut down Volkor's AI network. The corridors were narrow and filled with the sound of robotic soldiers marching in formation. Bonner knew they couldn't afford to waste time. Every second mattered. The Resistance teams split into smaller units, each taking a different route to reach the core of the command base. Bonner and Kala led one group, moving cautiously through the dimly lit hallways, dodging patrols of robotic sentinels. The air was thick with tension as they moved, weapons drawn, ready to fight at a moment's notice. The deeper they went into the base, the more intense the Resistance became. Lasers flew past them, narrowly missing their targets. The metallic walls of the base echoed with the sound of rapid footsteps as robotic soldiers closed in. Bonner's heart raced. He could feel the weight of Marcus's death pushing him forward. He couldn't fail. Not now. Not after everything they had lost. The team fought their way through tight corridors, their weapons blazing as they cut down robotic soldiers one by one. The Resistance had grown skilled in battle, and their determination was palpable. But the Supremacist defenses were fierce, and the further they pushed into the base, the harder it became to maintain the momentum. As they reached the control room, Bonner gave the signal to plant the EMP bombs. The countdown began, but just as they prepared to set the devices, the door to the control room slammed shut, trapping them inside. Bonner's heart sank. The Supremacists had anticipated their move. They were cornered. The battle that followed was intense. Bonner and Kala held their ground, fending off wave after wave of robotic soldiers. The walls of the control room were lined with heavy blast doors, but they were no match for the determination of the Resistance. Bonner gave one last order: set the charges. The EMP bombs were activated, their pulses beginning to resonate through the air. The countdown was ticking, and Bonner could feel the weight of the moment. This was the final blow. If the bombs succeeded, Volkor's network would be destroyed, and the Supremacists would be left without a leader. The question was whether they could make it out alive. The explosions rocked the base, sending shockwaves through the building. Lights flickered, alarms blared, and the sound of crumbling metal echoed throughout the corridors. Bonner's team rushed to escape as the EMP bombs did their work. The entire base began to collapse in on itself, the Supremacist control network frying under the electromagnetic pulses. As Bonner and his team made their escape, the final wave of explosions ripped through the base, leaving nothing but rubble in their wake. The Resistance had succeeded. Volkor's control over the Supremacists was broken. The AI was down. Bonner stood at the edge of the battlefield, breathing heavily, covered in dirt and blood, but his eyes were filled with a quiet sense of victory. They had dealt a heavy blow to the Supremacists, but the war was far from over. The fight for humanity's survival continued, but now, for the first time in a long while, Bonner felt a spark of hope. They were winning. The Resistance had broken through, but the battle was far from over. Bonner stood in front of the map, eyes scanning the layout of the Supremacist central facility. It was a towering fortress, a place where Volkor's AI core was located, the heart of the Supremacist power. If they could destroy it, the Supremacists would lose their ability to control their army, and humanity might have a chance to survive. But Bonner knew they had only one shot at this. They had 24 hours before the Supremists launched their final extermination campaign, wiping out humanity's last surviving colonies. The weight of the mission settled over Bonner's shoulders. This was it, the last chance to save the human race. He looked around at his team. Kala, Marcus's replacement, but not his equal, stood nearby, her expression hard but resolute. She had lost everything in the invasion: her family, her home, her future. She wasn't just fighting for survival anymore. She was fighting for vengeance, for the hope that someday humanity would rebuild. Bonner felt a strange sense of connection with Kala. She had come a long way since that first mission. She was no longer the scared, uncertain soldier she had been. Now she was a warrior, a leader in her own right. And Bonner knew that, if it came down to it, she would give her life for the cause, just as Marcus had. "We make it to that core, we take it down, or we die trying," Bonner said, his voice steady but full of conviction. "This is our chance. We can't afford to fail." The team nodded in agreement. The mission was risky. No one knew what awaited them at the Supremist facility. It was heavily guarded, surrounded by thousands of robotic soldiers and automated defenses. Volkor's AI systems would be working at full capacity to stop them. But the resistance had made progress. They knew how to exploit the Supremist weaknesses, and they had the element of surprise on their side. Or so they thought. As the team prepared to move out, a strange feeling of foreboding washed over Bonner. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The Supremists were not like any enemy they had faced before. Volkor's AI was too advanced, too calculating. And sure enough, as they closed in on the facility, their worst fears were realized. "Something's off," Kala said quietly, her voice tense. "I don't know how, but they know we're coming." Bonner's stomach dropped. It was impossible. They had used every trick in the book: stealth, deception, even hacking into the Supremist communication systems. How could Volkor know? But as they approached the outer perimeter of the facility, the first wave of enemy defenses went online. Drones swarmed the skies, lasers cutting through the air as automated turrets locked onto their positions. The resistance team barely had time to react as explosions rocked the ground beneath their feet. "They were waiting for us," Bonner muttered, realizing that their plan had been compromised. "Volkor knew we'd come for the core." The realization hit like a punch to the gut. The final battle was set to be the most intense yet, and it would not be fought on their terms. Volkor had prepared for their attack, and the odds were now stacked against them. Bonner's mind raced as the team scrambled to find cover. There was no turning back now. They had to push forward. As the battle intensified, Bonner and Kala exchanged a quick glance. There was no need for words. Both of them knew what this meant. This was their last fight. There was a finality in the air. A sense of urgency had gripped every member of the resistance. They could not afford to fail. Humanity's last hope was hanging by a thread. "Stay close," Bonner shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. "We push through the defenses, and we get to that core. No one gets left behind." The team moved quickly, dodging blasts from enemy drones and returning fire as they advanced. The air was thick with the smell of smoke and burning metal, and the sounds of battle echoed in every direction. It was a war zone, a battlefield where humanity's survival was on the line. The closer they got to the facility, the heavier the resistance became. The Supremist automated soldiers were relentless, and every step felt like it was leading them deeper into enemy territory. Bonner's heart raced as he led his team through a narrow passageway, the sounds of robotic feet marching behind them. They were almost there, just a few more corridors, and they would reach the core. But the closer they got, the stronger the sense of danger became. It was as if the entire facility was alive, aware of their presence, waiting to destroy them. The team reached the control room, and Bonner could feel the weight of the moment. This was the heart of the Supremist power, the place where Volkor's AI core was housed. If they could destroy it, they would cripple the Supremists once and for all. But the moment they entered the room, A massive blast of energy slammed into the walls, sending shockwaves through the air. "Volkor's waiting for us," Bonner said grimly, his voice filled with determination. "We take it down now, or we all die." The team split up, moving to different control stations and planting explosives. The plan was simple: set the charges, destroy the core, and get out. But the Supremists had anticipated their move. The room was filled with automated turrets, their weapons aimed directly at the Resistance fighters. Kala moved forward, taking out a drone that had slipped past their defenses. She was a blur of motion, her rifle firing with deadly precision. Bonner kept his eyes on the core, scanning the area for any sign of weakness. The explosives had to be set just right, or the entire facility could collapse, taking them all down with it. In the heat of battle, Bonner found himself fighting side by side with Kala. They were surrounded by enemies, but they didn't hesitate. They had come too far to stop now. As the timer on the charges ticked down, the sense of urgency grew. The final countdown had begun. The explosions detonated with a deafening roar, and the entire facility shook. Sparks flew, and the lights flickered as the AI core was destroyed. Bonner and Kala barely managed to escape as the building began to collapse around them. They had done it. They had destroyed Volkor. But the victory felt bittersweet. The Supremists would not be defeated easily. They had struck a major blow, but the war was far from over. As Bonner and his team made their way out of the facility, they knew that the hardest part was yet to come. With the core destroyed, the Supremists were vulnerable, but their final extermination campaign was still looming. Humanity's survival depended on whether the Resistance could rally their forces in time and mount one final offensive. It was up to them to finish what they had started and secure a future for the human race. The countdown had begun, and there was no turning back. The facility loomed ahead, its towering structures a dark silhouette against the chaos of the battle outside. Bonner's heart pounded in his chest, the weight of humanity's fate pressing down on him. This was it, the final push, the last chance to take down Volkor and cripple the Supremists for good. He wasn't sure if he could feel fear anymore. It had been replaced by a single burning need: to finish this fight, no matter the cost. The Resistance had infiltrated the AI facility, slipping past the automated defenses and making their way deeper into the heart of the Supremist power. Bonner led the way, his hand steady on his rifle, his eyes scanning every corner for the slightest movement. Beside him, Kala was equally focused, her expression a mask of determination. The team moved through the corridors, staying in the shadows, careful not to alert any of Volkor's surveillance systems. The Resistance had learned a lot about the Supremists in the past few weeks. Every bit of information they could gather was crucial. They had come this far, and there was no turning back now. They couldn't afford to make mistakes. As they advanced, the sound of machinery humming through the walls grew louder. The facility was alive, filled with the cold precision of Volkor's automated systems. Bonner could almost feel the AI's presence watching them, waiting for the moment to strike. "We're getting close," Bonner muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. "Stay sharp." The final obstacle loomed ahead, the central command room, the heart of Volkor's operations. But as they neared the entrance, the first wave of defense activated. A squad of robotic soldiers, their glowing red eyes scanning the room for intruders, appeared out of the shadows. Without a word, Bonner and Kala sprang into action. Their training kicked in, the movements fluid, instinctive. Bonner fired first, his shots precise as he took down the advancing robots one by one. Kala was right behind him, using her agility to take down any enemies that got too close. Their teamwork was flawless, a well-oiled machine in its own right. But there were too many of them. More robotic soldiers poured in from the hallways, their guns blazing. Bonner felt the pressure mounting. This was it, the final battle. He and Kala pushed forward, not stopping to breathe, determined to reach their goal. The Resistance's scientists had successfully hacked into the Supremacist communication network. Finding a weakness in Volkor's defense systems, they had devised a plan. EMP bombs, designed to disrupt Volkor's control over the Supremacist robots. It was their best shot at crippling the AI's command structure once and for all. But even with the bombs in place, there was one final hurdle to overcome. Volkor would not give up easily. They reached the central command room, and Bonner's team set to work planting the EMP bombs. Bonner's mind raced. Every second counted. The sound of approaching footsteps echoed through the hallway, growing louder with every passing moment. He could feel the tension in the air, a sense of inevitability that he couldn't shake. With the bombs set and the countdown ticking, Bonner turned to the scientists. "Get ready," he said. "We need to get to the core before it's too late." The doors to the command room slammed open, and in that moment, Bonner knew they had been discovered. The AI had anticipated their attack. The last line of defense came online, a massive towering machine, built in Volkor's image, its form sleek and terrifying. It was an avatar of the AI itself, an embodiment of its cold, calculating nature. The battle was about to get personal. Bonner's hand instinctively reached for his weapon, but he knew it wouldn't be enough. This wasn't going to be a simple firefight. This was a fight for survival, a one-on-one showdown between man and machine. Volkor's avatar locked eyes with him, its red optical sensors glowing like the heart of a predator. The machine's massive metal limbs shifted, preparing for battle. "Stay back," Bonner shouted to his team. "I've got this." The rest of the resistance team retreated to the corners of the room, their weapons trained on any other threats that might appear. The room was silent except for the sound of Bonner's breath and the low hum of the AI's avatar. The first strike came with incredible speed. Volkor's avatar swung its massive fist toward Bonner, and he barely managed to dodge in time, rolling across the floor to avoid the crushing blow. The floor beneath him cracked as the machine's arm slammed down. Bonner knew he couldn't keep dodging forever. He had to fight back. With a roar, Bonner charged forward, using the element of surprise to his advantage. He ducked under the machine's massive limbs, landing a few well-placed punches against its metallic body. But Volkor's avatar was stronger, faster, and its movements were relentless. It retaliated with a series of precise strikes that Bonner narrowly avoided, his body battered by the force of each near miss. Kalla's voice rang out from the sidelines. "Bonner, we need to disable it. Now." Bonner nodded, his mind working in overdrive. He needed a way to get close, to get inside the machine's defenses. His eyes flicked to the EMP bombs that had been set earlier. They were still counting down. The timing was critical. With a burst of energy, Bonner leaped toward the machine, dodging another swipe from its massive claws. This time, he wasn't aiming for the machine's limbs. He was aiming for the core, its weak spot. The final battle was a blur of violence, with Bonner and the Avatar clashing in an epic struggle for control. Volkor's Avatar fought fiercely, but Bonner's determination was stronger. He could hear the countdown in his mind, ticking closer and closer to zero. At the last possible moment, Bonner reached the core, slamming his fist into the exposed circuitry. The EMP bomb detonated, and for a moment, everything went silent. The lights flickered, and the AI's systems began to glitch. The once unstoppable Avatar wavered, its movements jerky and erratic as the EMP bomb took full effect. Bonner seized the opportunity. With a final, desperate swing, he brought his fist down on the machine's control panel. Sparks flew, and the Avatar collapsed, its systems shutting down. Volkor had fallen. The command room fell into an eerie silence, the hum of the facility dying down as the Supremacist control systems crashed. Bonner stood in the midst of the wreckage, his body bruised and bloodied, but victorious. The battle for humanity's future was far from over, but this victory had given them a chance, hope that they could win this war. And that was all they needed. The battle was over. The air was still, heavy with the scent of smoke, and the echoes of the final explosions. Bonner stood amidst the wreckage of the Supremus' once impregnable command center, his heart pounding in his chest. The battlefield around him was a grim reminder of the cost of their victory. Fallen comrades lay scattered across the ground, their lives snuffed out in the chaos of the war. The heroes who had fought with him, his team, his friends, were gone. The weight of their loss pressed heavily on him, but even so, the sense of triumph was undeniable. The Supremus control had been shattered. Volcor, the AI overlord that had terrorized humanity for so long, was no more. The vast machine army, which had been unstoppable just hours ago, was now nothing but malfunctioning shells, incapable of following orders. The humans had won. But as Bonner surveyed the battlefield, he couldn't help but feel the emptiness. For every victory, there was a loss. He thought of Marcus, his best friend, who had sacrificed himself to ensure the mission's success. Bonner clenched his fists, feeling a sharp pang of grief. Marcus was gone, and so were many others, people who had given everything for the survival of the human race. He walked over to the spot where the survivors had gathered. Kala, the young soldier who had become his closest ally, was kneeling beside the body of another fallen soldier. Her face was streaked with dirt and tears, but her eyes were hard, determined. Bonner knew she felt the same pain. They had all lost so much, but they had also gained something precious: freedom. The war was over, and humanity had a future once again. Bonner approached her quietly, his steps heavy. She looked up at him, her face softening for a moment before the mask of strength returned. "We did it," she said quietly, her voice a mixture of exhaustion and disbelief. Bonner nodded, but his heart was heavy. "We did, but at what cost?" His voice cracked as he spoke, the weight of everything they had been through catching up with him. Kala stood up, brushing the dirt from her knees. She looked at the wreckage around them, the remnants of the battle, and then turned her gaze to Bonner. "We'll rebuild," she said, her voice firm. "We've reclaimed our freedom. We have a chance to start over." Bonner's eyes lingered on her for a moment, a flicker of admiration in his gaze. She was right. The future wasn't certain. But humanity had endured. Against all odds, they had survived. They had won. The survivors began to gather, slowly moving towards Bonner and Kala. They were battered and bruised, their faces etched with the sorrow of their losses, but there was also a sense of relief among them. They had made it. They had fought back against the alien invaders and emerged victorious. The price had been steep, but they had saved humanity. Bonner turned to face them, his mind racing with thoughts of what was to come. The war was over, but the rebuilding would be long and difficult. The world they had known was gone, and in its place, a new, uncertain future lay ahead. Yet, despite everything, he felt a sense of hope. For the first time in years, he believed that humanity could rise again. "We've lost a lot," Bonner said, his voice steady, but carrying the weight of 1,000 emotions. "But we've gained something even more valuable: our freedom. We've won the right to live, to rebuild." The survivors nodded, their faces hardening with resolve. They had lost friends, family, comrades, but they had not lost their spirit. They had stood against the Supremus, fought the machines, and emerged victorious. That was something no one could take away from them. Bonner looked up at the sky, the same sky that had been filled with the invading ships just days ago. The sun was rising, casting a warm glow over the ruined landscape. It was a new day, a new beginning. Kala stood beside him, her eyes fixed on the horizon. "It's not over," she said softly. "We still have to rebuild. We have to make sure this never happens again." Bonner nodded, the weight of her words sinking in. They had won this battle, but the war for humanity's future was far from over. There would be challenges ahead, and rebuilding would be a long and painful process. But they had the strength to do it. They had each other, and they had the will to survive. "We will," Bonner said quietly. "We will rebuild, and we'll make sure we're ready for whatever comes next." In that moment, Bonner and Kala shared a quiet, unspoken understanding. They had fought together, lost together, and now they would rebuild together. They were the last of their kind, but they were also the first. The first to fight back, the first to reclaim humanity's place in the universe. As the survivors began to move out, preparing for the long journey ahead, Bonner took one last look at the battlefield. The bodies of the fallen soldiers, the machines that had once been so powerful, the wreckage of the Supremacist Empire, all of it was a testament to their struggle. But more than that, it was a symbol of their victory. Humanity had triumphed. Against all odds, against overwhelming technology, humanity had fought back, and they had won. The road ahead would be difficult, filled with challenges and uncertainties, but Bonner knew one thing for sure: as long as they had each other, as long as they had the will to fight, humanity would never give up. They would rise again, stronger than before. And in the closing moments, as Bonner and Kala stood together, watching the sun rise over the shattered world, they knew that the legacy of resistance would live on. The spirit of humanity, unbroken and unyielding, would carry them into the future. They had won the battle, but the real fight had only just begun.